Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Neighborhood News Studio with the best journalist, Ramaswamy's favorite journalist, George Webb. We are here, real people, real news in real time. We are here to deliver you the truth. With Norman Lee Smith jamming out to some reggae vibes to kick off this wonderful show today. Thank you, Norman, for starting us off with some right vibes. George Webb, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday morning?
Well, I'm great, Andy. I get up, very early. I got up at 2 this morning, and I got my Substack out at 5:30 in the morning. You'll see it from the timestamp. So my poor producer here, Andy, I sent him stuff the night before. I think I sent him like 50 files, something like that, and like 18 URLs. And then by the time I said all that, I wake up at 2 and then I do something totally different. And then he's like, "Wait a minute! I did the thumbnail for the thing that you were all set to go on at 9 o'clock, and now you're on a different thing."
You're right, George Webb. I went to bed thinking like, all right, we might be doing the show about this, and then I wake up, I'm like, no, what are we doing the show about? So George Webb, the hardest working man in journalism. That is why you guys are tuning in right now, because this man brings it. He brings the truth, and he brings it all the time. Like you said, 2 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. As long as George Webb's up, he's doing some research and he's trying to figure out what's going on. So, George, you mentioned your Substack. What do you got going on today?
Well, I basically decided to write a Substack that describes the 3 things that Ramaswamy put together. And these are the 3 big stories that Ramaswamy put together. And again, Ramaswamy is a Rockefeller wearing 3-inch heels. He buys companies after they've been hacked into, and the drugs have had all kinds of side effects. They're pennies on the dollar. He buys them for pennies. Then they run the trial in India. Then they bring it back, and then the IPO, and he makes $1 billion. So I'm not saying anything good about Ramaswamy here, other than the fact he put together the 3 key drivers of January 6th. And the big thing he said was, hey, it's not about the insurrection. The insurrection had almost nothing to do with January 6th. The 3 drivers, there was 3 drivers. One was Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia. People were sick of Trump, Russia. They were sick of the impeachments. They were sick of the Mueller report. They were sick of Peter Strzok. They were sick of all this stuff. And that started with Crossfire Hurricane when they found out about that stuff. And then that bled straight over into the lockdown, right? You can't be mad about Trump Russia anymore because you're getting locked down. And should be able to get through that paywall. There's no paywall on this article.
Ooh, they're making me do a paywall, sons of guns.
Are they really? Okay. Well, anyway,
I got through somehow.
You got through. Okay. Well, I didn't put a paywall on this.
You want to know how to get through George Webb's paywall?
It's not a paywall. This one doesn't have. That was probably just asking you to subscribe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the second driver, is people were mad about the forced vaccinations, the mandated vaccinations. Then the third thing you had was they were told that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, which was sort of another version of Trump Russia. And what Ramaswamy did is he put all those 3 things together and he said, hey, this is the reason for January 6th. Those just happen to be my best 3 stories and our research group's best 3 stories and our neighborhood news group's best 3 stories. We had more complete reporting on those 3 stories than anybody. So I decided to kind of just put it all together And I started out with on January 6th, or January 4th, why did Scott Pelley decide to target us there on the Potomac, right? Rather than Alex Jones. And he didn't target Tucker Carlson. He didn't target James O'Keefe. He didn't target Project Veritas. He didn't target any of these other folks. Why did he choose to target us there on the Potomac? And I think the reason is because we were the ones who had the best story of those three stories. And the ones that really got to the real truth, not just kind of like lab leak versus bat, but really like live exercise level detail.
Pretty much they were doing to you what they were doing to Trump the whole time. They were trying to kind of take a hit on your like journalistic not ego, but your credibility. They're trying to take you down a couple notches, just like they were doing with Trump with all the impeachments and his Supreme Court picks and all that stuff. Is like, let's hit George Webb's character a little bit. So when these stories start coming out, we see that they are like, the public's just not going to believe them because it's mainstream media conspiracy.
Right. And I think they were going after everybody on the Potomac there. And in this piece, as you scroll, Andy, it wasn't just me, but as you scroll through this piece, you'll see where, they put the target right on my forehead. They put 60 Minutes right on the forehead, right?
They did, literally right on your forehead.
But you can see we're talking about State Department people, and we're talking about the highest level of NATO right on the first day, first whiteboard. And if you roll through here, and we're in a public process, this is no transparency, all transparency, nothing hidden. And on the third day, you remember, you weren't there at this one, but if you remember, there's Pompeo, there's the Charette house we were at. Mm-hmm. Pompeo said it's a live exercise on the third day. I thought, hey, we got confirmation here. And then you could even hear Trump say, and you should have told me, meaning that Trump wasn't knowledgeable of this until this happened.
This was the Crimson Contagion at the time, correct? Or is this? I forget there's so many live exercises going on at the time.
I think this was more of an event 201 that got kicked off on October 19th, 2019. But you're right, Andy. It could be an extension to Crimson Contagion because that was for the U.S. But
did you want to play Ramaswamy's clip real quick?
Sure. Yeah. If you got it.
Yeah, I got it pulled up. So here's the clip that Mr. George Webb is talking about.
I truly thought he had seen our thing. He had seen our previous broadcast, and he was doing a promo. When I saw this, I thought he's doing a promo for Neighborhood News, the new Neighborhood News. I couldn't believe it. It's like he hit our three big stories.
I know this was the first thing you sent to me yesterday. When I saw it, I was like, I don't know. He's a little weaselly, but he does say some good things, and he's backing up some of our work. So I got to take it with a grain of salt sometimes. But here we go with Vivek Ramaswamy yesterday.
If this is okay, and I'm just kind of curious on the previous question that you those four things that were provably false.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of curious. I know some of these guys, we've been following some of you guys. I'm curious if there's any national media who actually believe that they were wrong.
Actually, it's a good question, Eddie. So Eddie's you guys are colleagues, two of the top state reps here. And I think that's a good thing to be curious about. Just by show of hands, who here is willing to admit that the Trump-Russia collusion hoax was indeed incorrectly reported by the mainstream media? Is there anybody here able to admit that was incorrect reporting? Why not? Why would that be inappropriate? I think it would be inappropriate. What's inappropriate is lying to the public.
We're doing our job asking.
Was the public lied to, or did the media report on the set of facts that were provided?
So that's a fair question. I actually think that the public was lied to long after the media systematically still understood that this was the product of the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a piece of Russian disinformation provided by the Hillary Clinton campaign that was served up to the federal government as a basis for issuing a FISA warrant to then potentially infiltrate a member of the opposition party. If this was Bush and Cheney doing it to John Kerry, this would have been the stuff of scandal, impeachment, and worse. And yet, I think it was an intentional lie that the media said that that account, which we now know to be true, was actually the Russian disinformation. Now, Shauna, I would be charitable in my interpretation of that.
So you want to get into that real quick, George Webb? Because that was number one. I know you did a lot of work into the Steele dossier, George Webb, and you were one of the ones uncovering what was really going on. Can you highlight some of your work on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I went to England a couple of times. I went to where Steele keeps his horse in Horsley. I went to his little town where he keeps all of his Ukrainian assassins. I went to his place in Winchester where he had Orbis. I went to I walked by his house. I didn't go up to his house, but I walked by his house where he really lives. And I went to all the different people that were involved in Salisbury, in Portendown, in the bioagents group. And the real story of Christopher Steele is he's an understudy and a protege of Richard Dearlove. And these guys have been doing bioagents since 1995, at least. Richard Dearlove goes way back further, but the big idea is they're bringing out the old Russian bioweaponeers, and they're placing them around the world so that they can create their havoc whenever they need to. In this case, they're not doing bioweaponeering, but they also brought out the cyber hackers. Like I've talked about, Dmitry Alperovich was plugged into where I worked for backdoors into the antivirus software. So that's the where am I here? I'm in England.
You're in England. You're talking about the Ukrainian bioweapons.
Yeah,
in his mansion and right next to the Christopher Steele's place.
Yeah, I'm in Buckingham Palace here. The Queen died not too long after that, by the way, and I had nothing to do with it. But I'm just making myself not to be a target of the MI6 or MI5. But you get the idea here is there was all these Russians that were brought in. Carter Page was inserted. He didn't even ever get a picture with Trump. Can you imagine? Papadopoulos was inserted. He did get a picture with Trump. Joe Schmitz was the guy who was running these guys. This guy named Gordon was running around with Butina. He was putting people, and their whole idea was that Trump would go into this place near Pennsylvania Avenue, 1717 Pennsylvania Avenue, and they were all wired for sound. They all had access badges. The Russian girls were there. They had 69 girls that Chalupa had brought in. Journalists, beautiful, willowy, young female journalists. They were all going to target Trump beginning August the 15th before the campaign. Well, the problem happened, you may remember, is that Trump didn't go to those offices in Washington. He stayed in Bedminster. And that kind of blew up the Crossfire Hurricane entrapment that Peter Strzok had laid out. But that had started with the CIA program before that with Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr. Christopher Steele Cossack dance, yes, Dave, the Cossack dance. This goes all the way back to Ukraine in '95 to his first wife that died mysteriously when he got married with an Oconus lure when he first got married. I saw Dave, by the way, last night on John O'Loughlin. And wow, what an incredible show that was. I just think he did a thing on Brown Brothers Harriman and the banking and so forth. It's a fantastic show with John O'Loughlin last night on McDuff Lives. But anyway, and he just keeps bringing it. It's just like a fountain, But Dave was there, at both of these events. And what I think we got to, because our group, I was on the ground in Washington going to Butina's house. There was an FBI raid at Butina's house after I went to Butina's house. I went to Oleg Deripaska's mansion. He was sanctioned after I went to Oleg Deripaska's mansion. I went and found I was chasing the Russian uranium for megatons of megawatts and also uranium-1. Mark Lambert was indicted after I went and visited after Task Force and I went and visited Mark Lambert. So we were ahead of the news on a lot of these Russia stories. And it looked like basically this group of Russians that since the fall of the Soviet Union have been brought in by Henry Kissinger into Washington, D.C. through this kind of intermediary, this Kissinger's place just north of the Capitol, and they were bringing and inserting them in. So we knew Trump Russia was a joke. It was a CIA operation. So I look at it and say, why does Ramaswamy call out neighborhood news here? It's like, well, have you seen the neighborhood news and the web reporting and all that? It's obviously false, demonstrably false, right? Now we'll go to the next story.
Or just one instance. Let me give an easier one. Just by show of hands, does anybody believe the media's reporting about the origin of COVID-19 ran flatly in face of the facts that you have a Wuhan Institute of Virology that was now the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? You all said that it wasn't for a long time. By show of hands, was the Wuhan lab the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? Everybody, media or not? So you have.
I can't believe they're actually raising hands a second time around. The first one, they're like, we don't want to be involved with the Russian collusion. The second one, they're like, okay. But there's another story you worked on, George Webb. This is where the virus, the origins of the virus came from. And George Webb, Wuhan military games, Miss Virginia B. I don't know if we're allowed to say her name just yet, but you were on top of this story. So this is another one. Ramaswamy's going with George Webb.
Right, and the thing is, the missile on January 4th in 2021 it takes out all three of these stories, and that's why I like what Ramaswamy is saying here, because if you look at our reporting, we had gotten off of the bicyclists. We just used the bicyclists to leverage up the ladder at NATO. We identified these top guys at NATO, and we had identified this woman, Virginia Benassi, that was getting all the bids for the Wellcome Trust for Jeremy Farrar, who was later implicated in the cover-up of the Lancet letter. And then also the WHO, which we know had a secret committee called the Secretariat that was taking in the real bids. And we know we outed DARPA Adept. We know DARPA Adept became the mRNA vaccines. This is before anybody knew what mRNA stood for. So again, I can see why Ramaswamy wants to call this out. Again, that's the magic, where the magic happened in March 2020 with the journalists on the Potomac, and then again in January in 2021. Now, if you scroll up a little bit more, what you'll see is the number one guy who promoted Trump Russia, Donnie O'Sullivan with CNN, is also there for the coronavirus story. He's also sort of like the bobcat or whatever, the wolf or whatever, the attack dog that they put out to knock down any stories that get to the truth about either Trump Russia. Number one, he attacked me first in 2017 on Trump Russia. The second one here now in 2020. So you also have Donnie O'Sullivan running along with these same stories. And if you want to, I call out.
How often in history have they done this, George Webb? Like taken one, you're just like a citizen journalist reporting stories, and they actually stick one of their journalists, a watchdog, like what you're doing exactly, just to debunk everything George Webb is doing. Like that, can't remember a time that has happened exactly like that. It's like George Webb comes up with stories, CNN puts out the opposite. George Webb comes with up with one, CNN. You don't come up with them. You do a lot of research, do a lot of digging, and figure it out. But they just are there to debunk what citizen journalists are putting out there. And
there you said it. It's the citizen journalist. It's a network. I put a lot of my own money into the citizen journalism network. That's why the network was better than CNN, right? And we get tremendous volunteers like yourself, but people from all over the world. And that's why we had the inside line. And plus we're not hiding things. We're broadcasting in transparency. So they're criticizing 3 years later now our working files that were being done live. Same thing as January 6th. So if you keep scrolling here, you'll see where Donnie O'Sullivan is and this Humpty Dumpty.
I forgot about Humpty Dumpty.
Delta, we're the two key attack dogs for Trump Russia and also for knocking down the coronavirus. Jim Sciutto got in the act, and Poppy Harlow also got on the act on this. So all four of them to take us on this time. But if you remember what we were talking about in May of 2017, before the first attack by Donnie O'Sullivan, was, hey, the old Soviet Union, when it fell, all the bios and nukes and the weapons didn't get to where they were supposed to go in the United States. I was going to Piketon, and the people were saying, hey, the uranium ain't getting here. And also these tanks seem to be filled up with something else because we're dying here. So we had talked about Ukraine and how they all seem to stop in Ukraine. And we were talking about these oligarchs and billionaires. Again, I can see why Ramaswamy is like, hey, what part of this is the hard part to understand, right? This seems like they're taking the old scientists from the Soviet Union, Christopher Steele again, and Dearlove again, and now they're hitting you with something else. The first time it was a hack, right, with hacking tools. Now it's the bio tools. So if you keep scrolling here, okay, you'll see where we were talking about Les Wexner and Jeff Epstein and Mark Epstein being the brokers. They were the brokers for these tools. And if you keep scrolling, you can see that, again, this is March 2017. And we were talking about Ukraine, right? And how this guy in Odessa sitting on this pile of bioweapons. So if you want to go back to Ramaswamy, he'll tell us the third story.
Then we'll get into how you broke it. Here we go.
Reported, the same media that has reported that the COVID-19 pandemic did not originate in a lab in Wuhan is willing to even say, unwilling to admit today.
The report came out in 2023, so I guess
it was known that there was a Wuhan Institute of Virology where they were conducting gain-of-function research, the very city which was the origin of a global pandemic. And yet the media's explanation was that somehow it could have been any source other than actually having started in the lab. I just think that that's systematically unacceptable. The Hunter Biden laptop. Is the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, which was shut down, had the Twitter account locked, or anybody who is even sharing the story of the Hunter Biden laptop found on the eve of the last election? The media reported that it was Russian disinformation on the eve of that election. Does anyone here agree that the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, was indeed accurately reported and was not Russian disinformation, but was in fact a factually owned laptop of Hunter Biden? I mean, you got to, man. Your paper reported it. Does everybody else seriously not believe that?
I mean, I believe that Hunter Biden is suing Rudy Giuliani over the laptop, so I don't think that.
So you don't believe? So you think that it actually was the product of Russian disinformation, as was reported by the media? That was the basis for suppressing this at the time.
Over the Hunter Biden case,
yeah.
I'm not sure why we're talking about that.
Because it was election interference on the eve of the last election. And I think there's the same kind of election interference happening this time around. And I think it's happening, the early waves of it with respect to the treatment of my candidacy. And I think that is likely to be a problem heading into the next.
Now he kind of wants to make it all about Ramaswamy. And I give him credit because he had hit on our three big stories, because before there was the Hunter Biden laptop on the eve of the election, where we have to make this split decision over the last second, whether it's real or whether it's Russian disinformation. Again, going back to May 2017, we actually had, with Bill Taylor, or a Bill Taylor lookalike, we actually had the Biden Blackberries, which were doing all the stuff, which were trading in all these Russian BIOS and nukes, right? So we actually had, with Senate markings, with officially Senate markings, and 2 fact witnesses, right? So we didn't have to say that we were doing Russian information. We had the actual 2 fact witnesses that say that that was the valid BlackBerry, and we had the official markings on the official thing. Now, I just don't think he knows that that's one of our best stories, but it's the troika here. He's the trifecta. This is the golden triangle. You know, give Ramaswamy the gold star here because he gets the Russian. This is the hat trick. This is like better than Ovechkin getting the hat trick for the Washington Capitals. He gets all the 3 big Russia stories, boom, 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 all right in a row. And again, you can see where they bring the Russians in again. If it's Hunter Biden, we'll say it's Russian disinformation. Why? Because it's true. Hunter Biden's BlackBerry is trading in the old Russian BIOS and nukes They are brokering them at the DNC. Those are going to various nations with nuclear ambitions or bio program ambitions, right? So they're telling the truth. It is Russian disinformation that it's the Hunter Biden laptop. It's not Russian disinformation that it's the Hunter Biden BlackBerry. We can show occurrence after occurrence how these State Department BlackBerries were used to talk to various people in Russia. Mike Flynn talks to Kislyak on the BlackBerry. I've interviewed a Secret Service person who heard Condoleezza Rice speaking in Russian, talking directly to Vladimir Putin on these BlackBerries, right? I got the film. So the only part of the Russian story about Hunter Biden's laptop that was disinformation was it wasn't about the laptop. The actual device to communicate with the Russians to broker these BIOS and nukes was the BlackBerry. And that's the only part of the story that they got wrong. And I actually interviewed somebody from the New York Post who wrote the story. I interviewed them in West Palm Beach, and they were like, whoa. You know, they found out about the BlackBerries. They're like, whoa. And they showed them the markings and everything. They're like, whoa. And they said that in the next words, and my editor will never let me print this because this is one of our biggest stories. This is one of our biggest stories with the laptop, and this would blow that story out of the way, and we're never going to print it.
Mm-hmm. And this is you breaking down the Rosemont Seneca and Hunter Biden's encrypted BlackBerry. May have done the Ukrainian biolab deals with MetaBiota, but Hunter is not the mastermind of the Ukrainian biomans. That's Kofor Black of Burisma.
Make me small, Andy, and make that big, because
Okay.
Nobody wants to see me. Everybody wants to see you, Andy. Nobody wants to see me.
I'd beg to differ, George Webb. But here's your story. You're in Salisbury, England, getting a Christopher Steele and Sergei Skripal and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. So that's, I get a little bit more into, at the end of this piece, I get a little bit more into Sandy Hook, because what they did in this piece also with Scott Pelley is he threw in Sandy Hook. And I had nothing to do with Sandy Hook. I only did one story, and I said Yale Medical School, Yale Medical School, Yale Medical School. I came away with saying, hey, these kids had, here you can see where I actually went to had several charrettes in Portsmouth at Piketon. You know, 5 or 6 now. So we've been there more times than, some people who named it, but just to show you, we actually go there and we actually have 10-day, 12-day news gathering events at these places. So we're not just saying, oh, well, here's something I read on the internet. Here's something I looked up. We actually talk to people who work there. We talk to people who are sick. We talk to people who have had relatives die from the plutonium poisoning. So this is something that we're verifying all along the way. If you go to the Sandy Hook thing, which is the next article,
they tried to lump you in with Sandy Hook and Alex Jones in the 60 Minutes interview.
Right. And again, the Russian thread here, because if you remember, I had researched this saying if they indeed did bring these Russian scientists over from Russia, from places like Novosibirsk and Sverdlovsk, they rinse them in through academic institutions. And I was looking in 2017, again, because Christopher Steele's bringing all these Russians in, Peter Strzok's bringing all these Russians in through New York, through Anna Chapman. They're placing these people and giving them a rinse academically and running experiments that they were running in the old little Russian towns. They're now running in little American towns and little American schools. And I had created a tie saying, hey, is the CIA running the same experiments that those Russians were running now in little towns like Sandy Hook? And that was what I was looking at the time, because all these kids had this weird meningococcal perturbation of their neural tube, their spinal cord. But as you can see, did Scott Pelley report that? No. He didn't report my suspicions about it being a Russian program that Yale had rinsed for the CIA. He had reported that I denied Sandy Hook. Not only didn't I deny it, I was looking into what was the common thing that linked all the victims. And if you could see here with Adam Lanza, he has this weird kind of deformity that starts when he's a kid, he's waving there. He kind of looks normal.
Mhm.
And then as he progresses, he's getting more like Marfan syndrome. Something is wrong genetically now as he's growing. And he had coordination problems. He had behavioral problems. He had the hearing problem, all these things. It just looked like a Russian experiment to me at the time.
Mhm.
Now,
So, so I guess this is Andy just talking, kind of just thinking out loud, but like if they're running kind of like just medical experiments on these kids, and it starts coming to light and they get busted, it's like they're going to need a major event to cover up what was really going on, correct?
Clean up on aisle 7. Yep, clean up on aisle 7. And because the metadata of the shooting was such that there's very few people wounded and 26 people killed, and they were all killed in this one room. And all these kids, what I had found out when I went up there, they were all tied together to the Yale Medical School, and they all had the seemingly similar things going on with their spinal cord and their brain. So if you roll through here, I put forth a little bit of information. There was 3 key guys that had come over from the Soviet Union. One was Ken Alabek. The other guy's name is Shosechnik. There was another guy named Popov. But you can see here the 2 people who immediately diagnose Adam Lanza are 2 Yale psychologists. And they have extensive records on these guys. And one of these guys, it just seemed like Les Wexner put the guy in there. If you want to scroll up a little bit for his qualifications, he was right out of this Israeli think tank, and the other guy was from gal was from Novosibirsk, which is one of the places where they were running these experiments. So it just seemed like a Russian experiment, and all the information that was coming out seemed like a Russian experiment. Now, if you can keep rolling forward, there's some data here from Popov himself. Mark Kulak played this yesterday, and Popov was in the Nova thing. Popov, right?
You want me to read this?
Yeah. You can read a little.
So here's Popov, and they're commenting on the research, correct, that they're doing?
Yes.
But Popov, while I didn't know the whole picture, I didn't know the scope of research, but I had some indirect knowledge, and I realized that it was a huge, huge problem, which involved dozens of different institutions and facilities.
Huge program. Huge
Program, which involved dozens of different institutions and facilities. At my level, I know what was the true purpose of the research, but sometimes I didn't know the final results of my work, creating superbugs. Nova, what was your specialty? What was the nature of your research? Popov. Initially, I was involved in the production of synthetic genes. That means we created in tubes in vitro gene constructs that did not exist in nature. The hope was making those constructs. It would be possible to provide bacterial agents and viruses completely new properties which they did not have in the natural conditions. So, for example, a virus could produce something absolutely difficult to imagine in natural circumstances, like peptides, which destroy the immune system in a very special way. Nova.
Now, before you go any further, there was evidence of this in Sandy Hook. There was evidence of this in the kids that were all wiped out, right? And so Popov worked with the neural tube, and in the formation of the neural tube in animals, in lower mammals, and then the notochord, and then the spinal cord in higher mammals, and so forth. He worked with what they call the myelin, which myelin is the thing that's sort of like on a electrical cord. It's sort of like the insulation, so that you don't have short circuits. And if you scrape away the insulation on your cord, like your cat eats it or your dog eats it or the mice eat it or whatever, and you have the short circuit. Well, this is what happens in the brain. So he was working on trying to put the actual myelin gene into other things that were infectious agents, like anthrax. So Yale was working on the anthrax, and also Bruce Ivins was working on recombinant technology, which is to take a gene out of anthrax and then put it into a different bacteria. Popov was working on the same things. So everything now later on, looking at this, I see the anthrax work that Yale has been doing and the aerosolizing Yale's been doing. And I'm going, wow, how was I so stupid that I didn't see this? But at the time, you can see how much they're focusing in on this neurological stuff. And I'll let you read a little bit more.
All right, we continue. So Nova, tell me that story. When you came over, how quickly did the U.S. government seize upon the fact? Before I continue, is Popoff? You think you would know Ken Alabac?
Yes, they were in the same company together, ABT.
Okay.
So they,
All right.
yeah.
So yeah, Ken
But here's the
Alabac is my.
thing.
Go ahead.
No way do, like, think about McDuff and a counterintelligence agent and the Soviet Union's over now, and here comes the guy who's developing a chimeric agent that could kill 100 million Americans. You know what? We're not going to track him for 8 years. We're just going to go ahead and lose him. And he goes down, and there's a guy named Andy DeBala that did a book cover called Tex Med, right? You know, Slaughter Texas. You can see it behind me. Guess where he goes? University of Texas Medical Branch. So I'll let you read this, and you're gonna be shocked, Andy, about how good that cover is.
So here we go. Nova, tell me that story. When you came over, how quickly did the U.S. government seize upon the fact that they had a very valuable scientist in their sphere? Popov. I came to the United States in April '92 to do research in the immunology and later in pharmacology in Dallas at the Texas University Medical Center. I might have to pop over there later today. I spent 8 years.
That's where Jordan Walker was, Andy.
Oh,
Where Jordan.
They were
with the thumb
both in
drive.
Dallas. Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
Getting kissed on the head by Karl Rove. And I spent 8 years peacefully doing research in this field, and I was so happy doing it compared to what I had done in Russia. It was only after 8 years that some people debriefed me, and they were mainly concerned about the spread of biological weapons from 4 former Russian facilities. So they really didn't touch on my research in the past. Nova, were you surprised that nobody looked into your past and figured out who you were and what you had been working on? Popov. Well, I wasn't really surprised. I was pleased because I didn't want even to think anymore about what I did in Russia. I was really happy doing peaceful, really interesting research in this country. So
Okay.
this is part of Callahan's when he brought the Russian scientists over, and they went from offensive biological weapons in Russia to defensive biological weapons in the United States, and that's why he's saying it's peaceful, right?
Yeah, exactly, Andy. Because here's my thinking: is if I'm the FBI guy, and we get an attack of anthrax that can only be done by a Soviet Union or a United States, not even Iraq. Iraq couldn't even have that cut and dry capability to do these exact fibers. You know, the exact micron, 2 to 5 microns. The first people I'm looking at are the people with means, motive, and opportunity in the United States. Somebody who's done the program in anthrax, somebody who has been with a foreign power, right? And they've been telling us ever since the start of the Cold War, watch out for the Russians. Yet the first thing that the FBI does is discount Russians living in the United States, like Alabac, like Popov, and like Pasechnik. Pasechnik was living in the UK. But there's not just 1 or 2 of these people. There's hundreds of these people that have been moved in by the FBI counterintelligence group with Peter Strzok. And later we found out, I'm sorry, I originally said Andy McCabe was bringing these Russians in, but later we find out Peter Strzok and Lisa Pager are doing this as well into places like Battelle, into our national laboratories to create these mass formation psychoses. And I just found it very interesting that the FBI immediately rules these Russians from the former bioweapons programs who know how to do this stuff, that are now living in the United States and have opportunity. They immediately rule them out.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
And this is the DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency that runs these operations mainly. And it just so happens that Domain, our biological tool that spit out the therapeutic remdesivir for SARS, Domain was created by the DTRA, right, George Webb?
Well, I think it was created by Ralph Barrick and Sina Bavari, but it was DTRA money. And DTRA really doesn't mean Defense Threat Reduction Agency. It means Defense Threat Production and Reduction. Because if we produce a threat, then we get tremendous amounts of money, and then we use that money to reduce the threat. So it's a virus vaccine game that DTRA is about. And I talk about DTRA a little bit later, but I'll let you read this last panel here if you want.
All right. Popov. Essentially, I found a connection to Ken Albeck here in this company, Advanced Biosystems, where both Popov and Albeck now work. And I decided to move from Dallas to ABS. That's outside of Battelle, right, in Ohio?
Yeah, it's a little bit north of there, I think.
Like a little house, if I remember correctly. It wasn't like a facility. It was just like a house in the country kind of type thing.
He got a bigger thing up near Solon, Ohio, near Cleveland, near Kolomoisky. When Kolomoisky kind of took over Cleveland, the ABS moved up by Kolomoisky.
Oh, so you moved into the steel plant?
Who buys the Warren steel plant, right? I've been to it many times. Who buys an empty plant and then doesn't do anything? And the reason why they like these old steel plants is they have extensive underground rail networks. So all the digging's already been done. So you don't make a lot of attention when you start getting frontline loaders and you start moving stuff around. And you can move people in and out of there at night, and you can have a big lab down there. And we saw a tremendous electrical usage at this lab, similar to the old Warren Steel plant, similar to the huge electrical usage at Battelle National Laboratories, where they aerosolize anthrax. Just saying.
Yeah. Do you here? I guess I'll finish reading this, and then you were finally debriefed, Popov. Yes. Then I finally was debriefed because I exposed myself at that moment. So the moment he met Ken Albeck that's when, oh, this guy's on the radar. And were people fascinated by what you told them? Popov. Yes, I think so. Ken Albeck already had described these directions of research in his book Biohazard, but I know details about how it has been done and what has been done. I do have a little video showcasing the CTR cooperating with Russia if you want me to play it real quick.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
The Russian government has made headlines recently with its baseless accusations against the United States. Accusations that can easily be refuted.
Sorry, George Webb. I played
there is an obvious truth.
There's two of them. I
Russia's
played the
lies,
wrong one.
Truth, the Kremlin.
This is the one I wanted to play. It has Sam Nunn talking about it. I apologize.
Well, even that video goes back and talks about when the fall of the Soviet Union happened. And we were following this since Mark Rich. We actually had somebody, Gary, if you remember Gary, down in San Diego. He was actually there in the hotel watching these deals happen. So this isn't something like we're getting third hand. So I'll let you play this.
Sorry, you could have kept talking right there, but here's the beginning of this video. The DTRA Cooperative Threat Reduction Program works with partner countries to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. After working with Russia for almost 15 years and successfully disarming weapons of mass destruction together, Russia severed ties with the United States and began fueling information in the CTR program. This is the story of how the U.S. worked with Russia to reduce the WMD threat and how Russia turned against the U.S. and its neighbors to spread lies. The origins of CTR.
I was in Hungary, Budapest, Hungary, at a conference, and it was a conference about the Soviet Union.
This is Sam Nunn from the Nunn and Luger.
And there were people from the Soviet Union there, including a friend of mine, who later under Yeltsin became deputy defense minister by the name of Andrei Kokoshin. He came to the conference a day or two early and left because there was a coup against Gorbachev. That was August of 91. I got there about the time he was leaving, and into the conference, which lasted 3 or 4 days, I got a phone call from him because Yeltsin was basically defying the takeover against Gorbachev. And Kokoshin had been called back, and Gorbachev had by that time been released. So a lot happened in those 2 or 3 days. But he asked me to come to Russia, and he used the term Russia several times, not the Soviet Union, and it still was the Soviet Union. And I said, oh, I have no passport, I have no visa, I have nothing. I had a passport, not a visa. And he said, I'll have the Russian ambassador in your hotel in Budapest in about 45 minutes. And I laughed. I said, you all can't, your bureaucracy is much slower than ours. You can't do anything in 45 minutes. He said, be in the lobby in 45 minutes. You'll have your credentials to get there. So I basically went downstairs, and to my great shock, the ambassador did show up, and he did have my credentials. Long story short, I caught a train to Frankfurt and flew to Moscow. And in the Frankfurt airport, the American ambassador from Moscow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to play this whole thing, George. You want me to keep going?
I think you can go forward a little bit because this is the guy who comes up with the bill that brings all these scientists into the United States. And they pay the bounties and bring these people into the academic institutions. One of them was the University of Florida, where we were talking about with Allchem, with these nanoparticles. And we're retreading the old Russian technology down there with all these Russian scientists and Ukrainian scientists down there. So again, I think, Scott Decker immediately focusing on, immediately ruling out a state-sponsored weapon, as ruling out state-sponsored actors for a state-sponsored weapon doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, right? And then we had also uncovered the fact that they were rinsing all of these Russian programs. The CIA was rinsing all these by putting in people in front of them. In 2019, we found this Duisburg Scholarship Program. So they were going to put Mohammed Atta in front of this Russian program, the one that was running in Germany. And he was going to be the front man for the anthrax program, right? So that we could say that the 9/11 terrorists did the anthrax when Atta did not have the skills to do that. So you can see what's going on here is the FBI Counterterrorism Division is repurposing all of the stuff that Russia was planning to use on the American people. They're turning down the volume a little bit, but they're going ahead and using it on us. And then they get the money for the countermeasures at DTRA. That's the virus vaccine game here.
And what Popov is saying about how he went like unrecognized in the system for 8 years or so. It's like the Sam Lugar, or the Sam Nunn and Dick Lugar, they go over to Russia. They bring all the scientists over. Yeah, they take the Alibaks, like a couple of main ones, and like, yeah, we know where these guys are. And like you're saying, you have these Russian scientists kind of go off in the little small towns, start doing their little experiments like they were doing in Russia. And if something breaks out and he's a Russian scientist that they don't know about yet, Russians, the news story is Russian scientists releases bioweapon in the U.S. and they can completely scapegoat themselves from the story.
And I just want to say, again, the fact check. We looked at the dozen or so scientists they brought in every 2 years, Bogacheva and Krylova, and they were caught red-handed releasing a toxic cloud at Republican events. Caught red-handed, right? Working directly with Nancy Massonnier. So here we go.
5,000 nuclear warheads spread across the former Soviet Union. Let's say 22,000 of those or so were tactical warheads, and the rest were strategic warheads. And those ended up being on the territories of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and in Ukraine. And so none of those countries, after thinking about it for a while, wanted to have those weapons. So they had to be returned, they had to be secured. Where were they going to go? And so anything goes.
The ones in Ukraine stayed, correct?
Yeah, they didn't give them up right away. And that's a big story. Now, this is megatons of megawatts. This is the story I'm working on. And I'm interviewing the people where it's supposed to go in Piketon, Ohio. And they're all saying, the canisters are getting here and they're empty. And we're all getting sick because they're all plutonium fouled. So this is the program. Here we go.
Everything might be for sale. And so you wanted to be able to get control of that material, those warheads, that material, those launch systems,
uranium,
and make sure that they didn't fall into the wrong hands.
At that time, the mission was to remove the warheads from Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Ukraine, ship them back to Russia. We had agreed with the Russians that would be the best way to dispose of the excess warheads. So the very first mission was to take armored blankets. These are Kevlar type blankets, protect against small arms fire and fires while warheads are in transportation. And the Russians didn't have that kind of protection, so we got them out of Army reserves, excess material.
I came to work for DNA in 1996. I was assigned to the Nuclear Weapons Storage Facility program, and along with that,
Did he just say he came to work from DNA to nuclear weapons, George Webb?
Yep.
there was material protection control and accounting, all kind of around what we were going to do or what the Russians were going to do with the material that came out of weapons that were being returned to them from Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan for dismantlement.
We were really facilitators and supporters, but it was the first time we actually got to engage with the Russians face to face. It was the first physical mission where we delivered something, which I think was really important to get the program started.
My first project in CTR was in spent submarine fuel. So as a submarine officer, I think it was logical to put me there. And so I spent a year and a half working with the Russian Federation on spent nuclear fuel transportation. And this is something that's been a part of the CTR program for a long time. Russian submarines run on highly enriched fuel.
You know, one thing I noticed during this little video, George Webb, there's not a lot of Donald Trump cooperating with Russia in this one. the Russia collusion with Trump doesn't seem to be very apparent here.
Yeah, that is Dick Lugar. Yeah, and yes, this is very much a State Department run program. The State Department is the agency that has control of the bios and nukes, and that's the key thing to remember here. So when we're looking for releases later on, like Ramaswamy says in 2020, we're looking for State Department. We're looking for State Department encrypted BlackBerries. We're looking for State Department encrypted communication. We're looking for State Department people who report in diplomatic services all the way to the top of NATO. We're looking for people at the highest levels of NATO. We're not looking to pick on some bicyclist. We're not. We're looking for state level and five-star general on up. That's what we're looking for. So I guess that's the other thing that's missed totally in this. It's a national security story. It's brought to us. You know who the White House reporter is. That's still we're keeping that under wraps, but it's brought to us by a White House reporter from the Chinese ministry. So that's the mindset that doesn't come through with Scott Pelley's reporting here at all. So if you want to move through a little bit into the video, Andy, and I don't know if they talk about the bios or not, but Sverdlovsk and Novosibirsk or not. But we certainly went to BWXT, where we went to the factories, went to 3 different BWXT locations. I went to the factory in Barberton, Ohio. We looked at the spent fuel. We looked at Gonter. The Gonters were involved in the nuclear fuel program and did a big report to Congress about how they had to replace all the leaks and seals. We talked to the welders for the leaks and seals. So we really did a deep dive, so to speak, on this spent fuel as well.
All right, they do get into the biolabs, so here we go.
Was halted by the Joint Staff because of the Russian incursion into Crimea in 2014. And so that was the last engagements that we had.
Mr. Putin's power was increasing, obviously at the time. And so, he had a decided opinion of what the relationship with the West should be. And so that particularly.
So, I guess I'm garnering from this in 2014 when Russia attacked Crimea. That's when this CTR, DTRA, Russia cooperation just completely dissolved. And then shortly after that, that's when you start hearing all like these Russia collusion hoaxes going on, correct?
Yeah, I think it was one of those Saddam Hussein type things where we said, let's have a free and fair election in Crimea. Crimean people had this guy named Simon Mogilevich. We talked about that again back in 2016, 2017, who was selling these weapons from the old Russian Soviet Union, kicking back bribes to the DNC, right? So it was just a cesspool of crime. Crimea, this little island south of the thing, Russia, and people wanted to get rid of the crime gang. So they voted the Russians in 95%. Well, the people like Anthony Blinken and Victoria Nuland and all the hardliners that carried the Biden BlackBerries, the State Department encrypted BlackBerries, they all said it was an invasion. They all said it was a fake election. 95% of the people voted for the Russians, you know. So they said, okay, this gives us the propaganda we need to now stage an overthrow in Ukraine. And these same BlackBerries, these same encrypted devices are used to overthrow Ukraine. And this is where Hunter Biden gets involved at the tail end. These BlackBerries have been used several times in Libya and Syria and various operations to move weapons and so forth from Libya to Syria, for instance, with Christopher Stevens. He's murdered. But now the BlackBerries are moving to the Ukraine, and now Hunter Biden's getting involved because of Joe Biden. And they're going to do something. They're going to bring them in and say, these are just for energy deals. We want you to do a Gazprom deal in Ukraine. We want you to do some Rosneft deals in Russia. We want you to do some Chinese nuclear group deals in China. We want you to sell the old Russian highly enriched uranium to China through the Chinese nuclear group. We want you to sell the Russian gas and oil through Rosneft. Carter Page brokered that into a Chinese CEFC. And this is where Hunter Biden gets the BlackBerry to do these deals. And that's why he's yesterday in the in the Senate Oversight Committee. So this is very topical right now, but this is exactly why Hunter Biden's brought into the situation. So
there you go.
Colored that relationship.
The disinformation promoted after we worked so hard to try and work as partners is really disheartening.
Yeah, that little snippet right there from 2014. U.S. has biolabs with Ukraine with anthrax in them in Ukraine. That was in 2014. You know,
it's in Odessa, and Andy Weber of DTRA shook the vial in the face of Barack Obama. It's almost like he shook it in the face, said, "Hey, we can put this in one of your kids' ear any night we want." You know what I mean? It was kind of like your work for us. And Barack Obama was one of the key understudies of Dick Lugar, and he took him all through these countries when he was the junior senator of Illinois. So Barack Obama is very familiar with all of this and carried the BlackBerry as well as John Kerry is very familiar with all these dealings.
And there's the famous picture, or is that the older? That's the picture, right?
That's the picture. That's
in
Odessa.
Waving the anthrax, Andrew Weber waving the anthrax around.
Yeah, so, and if you remember, a year before that or 2 years before that, that's exactly how the war started with Iraq. Again, another mass formation psychosis, probably the same vial of anthrax, right?
Yeah.
Shake. And then we're in a 20-year war, not only in Iraq, but also in Afghanistan. So again, these things are easy to pick apart if somebody doesn't poison your brain with somehow a lone gunman theory. If you think about it, the people who are in total control of all the materials, the bios and the nukes from the very beginning is the U.S. State Department. And then these things keep getting accidentally released with these mass formation psychosis, and they're the key beneficiaries. There's no lone gunman involved. There's no lone scientist involved. The lone scientists don't get a hold of this information. Bruce Ivins is contracting out to this person at Patel Labs and this GE Health Systems to do the cutting and drying of the anthrax. And they're the ones that are responsible for gassing the monkeys. Bruce Ivins is not involved in gassing the monkeys. He's just looking at the data. So this is why Bruce Ivins had to go, because Bruce Ivins is an insider. He's the world expert. And he's going to say, this isn't how it works. And as a matter of fact, he did say this to Scott Decker in November of 2001. And the reason why I think they bring out Popov in 2001 to do the Nova documentary that we're reading from right now is to make him not the guy, make Popov not the suspect, make the Russians that we brought here that are a part of the State Department program not the guys. They're the helpers. They're going to help us find who it is. And Scott Decker had already determined in November that it's an American at Fort Detrick. They don't cut and dry the anthrax there, Scott. They do it in Piscataway, New Jersey, right next to where the mailboxes are that sent out the letters. So you can see right away it's a cover-up right from the beginning of the Amerithrax investigation.
It is, yeah, it is. Like, why aren't they looking at the Russian scientists they just brought over under the radar? It seems kind of obvious, but it's like, oh, we're using them and we can't have that highlighted. But here we go back to the video.
It helps them definitely on the world stage, you know, to achieve their means of knocking the United States down and raising their own voice.
To say things like, you know, Ukraine is trying to develop nukes. No, we worked with the Russians in Ukraine on making sure that those warheads are removed, right? We provided them assistance to do that job, right? And then to say that it's on us and that we're doing something behind their back, it just makes no sense.
The Russians never said that. The Russians never said that, and I never said that. What I said was the nuclear material, the highly fissionable material, the 95% enrichment material never left Ukraine. Kolomoisky and before that Mogilevich controlled it, and they were brokering it out to countries with nuclear ambitions or nuclear power ambitions, not necessarily nuclear weapons ambitions, but countries like Iran. They also were doing people who had nuclear medical, which is about 20% enrichment, so nuclear medical ambitions. So the State Department is using this, and the people that were in control of it were in Columbus, was Les Wexner, was Jeff Epstein and his brother Mark Epstein. They were the ones brokering this. And through this Humpty Dumpty thing in Congress, they were kicking back money to all their favorite candidates, and they were all carrying these same encrypted BlackBerries. So it's an easy, it's an easy network to figure out, right? It's like, oh, okay, this ties everybody directly to Ukraine. And Hunter Biden and this Biden advisor coming in and dropping this in my lap really made it easy because he said that's what it was.
So this is actually a little eye-opening video. It's like at the same time as all this is going on, we're cooperating with Russia, like this guy's saying. In Ukraine, we got Joe Biden, we got Hunter Biden running around making backdoor deals with Burisma and the energy companies in Ukraine. We got Joe Biden trying to get the special prosecutor fired. It's like the Council on Foreign Relations is over in Ukraine running rampant, making these backdoor deals with their BlackBerries, and the Russians are like, wait a second here, we're not getting all of our uranium back. They're building biolabs in Ukraine. There's a lot of funky stuff going on all of a sudden. We agreed to do some of this stuff in the 90s, and then like some of these characters that we're seeing in control nowadays, the Obamas, the Bidens and stuff, were all just kind of setting it up back then. And they didn't like what was going on. So the CTR and DTRA in Russia had to split off because of all this drama.
Here we go.
Sense. It's an obvious part of the war promotion.
If you tell a lie often enough, eventually some people are going to accept it or forget that it was a lie in the first place. And I think that's what Russia is hoping will happen, that eventually they will, kind of wear down the resistance and the counter messaging. Countering the big lie that Russia's trying to put out there is very, very important.
We were building lots of laboratories. We were training lots of scientists. We were providing modern tools to those scientists.
Like what this guy just said. We were building lots of laboratories. We were training scientists. We were training them in modern techniques. It's like, what else do you want to know, guys?
And there's 45 of them. And I'm not pushing the biolab thing really at this point. I'm just saying that I don't want the people like Peter Strzok and Andy McCabe using FBI counterterrorism and using FBI informants, FBI, ex-Soviet spies and hackers like Dmitry Alperovich. I don't want them running operations on the people of the United States. That's what counterintelligence is supposed to protect us from, not foist on us and attack us with. And that's being used to subjugate elections. That's being used to subjugate the American people through lockdowns. So the continuing thread, and the reason why I think Scott Pelley picked us, is we had all three. We had the Russians with the hacking, and this goes all the way back to me in 2001 with Dmitry Alperovich. Maybe even before that, 2002 in Princeton. I think my brother had some attack signatures on Merck that were done by FBI with Soviet scientists. And there'll probably be more proof of that in the coming years. But then we also are using the old stuff with anthrax for anthrax 9/11, and then adding a corona spike to it, and then doing corona 9/11. So this has nothing to do with an individual lone gunman, and Bruce Ivan's dead when corona 9/11 happens, right? And they're still using and stockpiling his technology as of a couple days ago. So you see here, if we don't break this and they're going to continually use these old stockpiles against us, we're going to lose all of our freedoms. And all the work we did to get a hold of those stockpiles during the Cold War is for naught if they're all going to come and then in the United States, even closer to us, and then be used against us. That doesn't make any sense. So we have to break this cycle. We have to break it right here, right now. So, yeah.
And not to mention our boy Callahan was involved in all this as well. He was one of the main scientists the U.S. scientists cooperating with the Russian scientists to bring him over, and he has his hands all over what's going on too. It's like there's this whole Russian story. It's just the Russian scapegoat, pretty much. That's what it seems like.
Hey, Andy. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I was hoping that we could give our folks a mental break at the hour mark here before we go into our next hour. We've got a little bit over, but I was hoping we could play one of those. I love when you played the Blackberries with Andre Taggart, or we did a little musical montage with Norman with various shots. And it may give everybody just a little time to breathe, because this is hard to take. Here are people we've hired, like the McDuffs of the world, to protect us from the Russians. And now it flips around, and now they're bringing them in to be used against us. Like Christopher Steele is just the first one. And Ramaswamy, I got to give him credit. He's the first one who picked up on this theme that, hey, wait a minute. These are all these guys brought in by FBI counterintelligence and CIA that are being used against the American people.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the Norman video right now.
or the other one I like is Andre Taggart, because don't take my word for it. Take somebody who did diplomatic security, who had a secret clearance, who knows what the Blackberries look like, and he knows what government markings look like. You can play that.
Here's the Blackberry transition.
Started seeing like blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries. They were blackberries. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment.
There's your Blackberries. I didn't mean to blow everyone.
I just love that. I just love that clip, because if you didn't think it was Blackberries before that clip, hopefully this removes all doubt, of what they were. This is the spying in Congress. When Trump wins unexpectedly, they do a robbery of 20 different offices at the Congress, and they put them out at this guy's house. And this guy's saying what was in there and what was on them. And he's saying the Blackberries and their government markings. These are the spying in Congress encrypted devices. So there's no doubt here. You've got a fact witness that this happened. And this is why the person that I used to do films with who made that, this is why he got 1 million views yesterday, because he went in and made a story about Hunter Biden being in the oversight committee. Did he say, where's your Blackberry, Hunter Biden? Did he stand up and go, where's your Blackberry, Hunter Biden? right? That would really unwind the whole thing. No, what he said was there was a Netflix cameraman there, and Netflix is making a documentary. You got 1 million views for that. Netflix is making a documentary about Hunter Biden. Yeah, we told everybody Kevin Morris was contracted to do that a couple of days ago. So what's the big surprise? That's what got 1 million views. You can see what they're doing. They want people to think about the Netflix. They want people to think about Hunter Biden. They don't want anybody to think about the Blackberries. There's a woman, Congresswoman Mack, or Mace, M-A-C-E, who said, Hunter, you have no balls, right? Right? And that got all the press. She didn't say, Hunter, we have your Blackberry. If she'd have said, Hunter, we have your Blackberry, there wouldn't have been anybody screaming from the Democratic side. They got all the shots that they wanted, by the way. They would have said, there would have been tombstone silence, because everybody on the panel who carried a Blackberry would be like, oh my God, they might have mine too. Notice how anytime we get close to cracking the ring here, it's always some kind of distraction and 1 million views, right? Because I said there's a Netflix cameraman. I think everybody knows what a Netflix is. We had a show about it. Dun, dun, right?
Pretty sure there's also 7,000 Hunter Biden documentaries on Netflix and YouTube.
Well, this one, yeah, I mean, sorry.
Go ahead.
So if we can go back to this Substack, it would be great. Plus, I sent you a ton of graphics about Gail Smith.
I got your videos also, if you want me to pull them up. And if here's just a quick, I was just going to pull this up. If you don't think if you think George Webb is wrong, here's even like the Guardian. All the president's emails, Rahm Emanuel, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, senior White House staff. In a unique experiment in democratic transparency, Barack Obama, a BlackBerry owner and the first American president to use email while in office, has agreed to copy G2 and on his otherwise highly confidential electronic communications. Yeah, they didn't put all of them in there, but yeah, the whole staff, everyone has little Blackberries they're walking around with, communicating with everyone.
And apparently there's somebody in the chat that's basically saying, I know the deep NSA person that shadowed you for a year before they ever met you, and they had 8 relatives and they shadowed you, and their father worked for DARPA and they shadowed you, and when you went to the hijacker hotel because you thought the Blackberries were used for the they shadowed you, and NSA has been shadowing you. And why haven't you found Deep BlackBerry since NSA has been shadowing you? Well, it's, again, we had a face recognition capability until a call was made by that same person who you just saw, right? And he outed the fact that we had a face recognition capability. That same person also pixelated the BlackBerry, so we didn't know. So they're making it seem like, oh, we've had the picture of Deep BlackBerry for 8 years. No, we haven't. That person finally unpixelated the BlackBerry just a couple of weeks ago. So they're trying to say, well, why don't you people, you've had 8 years to find Deep BlackBerry. You've had his picture. No, we haven't. That person has pixelated it for the last 7 years. We've only had it for the last week. And that person's also responsible for us getting the facial recognition capability taken away from us, right? So this is the disinformation in the thing. But in bringing out the disinformation, it brings out the true information. The cure for bad speech is more speech, right? The cure for bad speech is more speech, not less speech, right? So I'm perfectly happy when disinformation comes in, because it allows us to talk about the fact that that person, and you can see the guy's telling him straight to his face, it's Blackberries, straight to his face. Now, why would you pixelate the Blackberry then? If the guy that you're sitting and interviewing in 2017 is telling you straight to your face, it's the Blackberries, why would you pixelate it? If he's saying the Deep BlackBerry guy is the real guy, and Deep BlackBerry gave us critical information, why would you pixelate that guy's face? I never saw the picture and knew about that interview until just a few weeks ago. Yet they've gone and done 9 stories about my content in 2017, trying to monetize my content. Go ahead, Andy.
I was just saying here, you've done plenty of stories, and just like you're saying, that video, I could play that video again, but it's the BlackBerry. Blackberries. He says it 7,000 times in the little video. That's a first-hand knowledge of the situation right there.
Andy, if I would have been in the Nunn-Lugar team, and we would have went over there, and we would have went to all the different places the nuclear weapons were, and we would have went to all the places the bioweapons were, and we were going to arrange to have them all shipped to the United States. We were going to bring in all these scientists, and we were using, let's say, Apple iPhones if they existed. Guess what I'd be looking for? I wouldn't be looking for Blackberries. I'd be looking for the Apple iPhones. I'm looking for whatever communication device did the deals. And we're not talking about what happened after 2022 or 2021 when they moved off Blackberries. We're talking about what were the devices that were used to move these weapons, the bioagents and the nukes. You don't get a choice. It was the Blackberries. Sorry, you don't get a choice. And when you have somebody come forward and say, we didn't do the weapons. I know Joe Biden. I've known him for 4 decades. I think he was knew him for a little bit of the 80s and knew him for a little bit of 2010s. I don't think he knew him 40 total years. I think it was more like 35. But if you have somebody saying, we just did the energy deals, Burisma was used for other things that we didn't know about. We did the energy deals. We did the energy deals with China. We sold maybe the uranium, and we sold the oil and gas from Rosneft to Gazprom. Yeah. And CNG and CRFC. And Warren Buffett, all I knew was Warren Buffett was the person who was in on the deal. Later on, I found out that was Rothschild Energy, and the Belt and Road deal was the people who were brokering the deal. Rosneft was being represented by Warren Buffett. And the person who he mentioned that night was Seth Rich, said Seth Rich was the go-between. Now, we don't know that yet because the FBI is still suppressing the information about the Seth Rich laptop. But Seth Rich was the runner for Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was the person orchestrating the 10% slug for Warren Buffett with Rosneft in this CFC China Nuclear Group deal. That's what they don't want to come out in an open session with Hunter Biden. They want it to be, hey, Hunter Biden's going to make a Netflix documentary. That's what's going to get 1 million views. Not Warren Buffett doing the Rosneft deal into CEFC, not the Rosneft slug into the China Nuclear Group deal. That's not what they want, right? And everybody on that panel who carried a BlackBerry doesn't want it either. They want this to be about sex. They want it to be about cocaine, right? So if you return to the Substack, Andy, and we can just finish that off. And then I don't know if you had any of the other. Oh, this is good. This is good.
So here's your just how the BlackBerry is built exactly with all the classified keys and the classified serial ports, and then they have unclassified ports as well on the phone. So it's like you can do classified stuff and unclassified stuff in the same phone. That seems kind of odd.
Yeah, but Eddie, I know the person who ported PGP to a non-official version. This is the official version for the State Department that was approved. All these people that did these deals was non-official, and they used Soviet encryption. Right. This is why when my brother is in Princeton looking for who hacked into Merck, because he saw the Russian attack signatures at Merck for Vioxx, right? He saw the Russian attack signatures. Now you're coming from US IP addresses, and that's confusing when you're looking for Russian attack signatures from some kind of Russian satellite state. That's where he started thinking, hey, maybe it's people that are being brought in. I had just left a company in disgust because we had hired a Russian who was hacking in and putting in backdoors into the McAfee software. So we had some communication about that. So this is who I think hacked Merck. This is how Celebrex celebrated. I even think Casey and the Sunshine Band may have done a song about it. Celebrex, good times, because we just hacked Vioxx. We just took Merck out of the pain business. So you can see what's happening here. Just today, you could see 1 million views for the guy who I'm going to give you 1 million views if you pixelate Deep Blackberry. I'm going to give you 1 million views about Netflix if you pixelate the BlackBerry, right? And pixelate Deep Blackberry. Why? Because they don't want this story out.
All right. Do you want to, which video did you want to play, George Webb, or did you want to get into the photo slide that you sent me before
Let's do the photos, because I'll just show you. We were talking about USAID and how these were used in USAID as well. And now you'll see all the revelations about Jeff Epstein we were talking about early in the week. All are verified here. Yeah, there she is. There she's breaking them up. That's Peter Duke's great artwork. She's smashing them.
Smashing those boys. That's a good representation of Hillary, I'll say.
When she was 20, yeah.
When she was. Did you want me to start at the other side?
Well, let's just start with Blissfield right there. Blissfield, okay. We got a huge amount of money. We announced we're going to do brick and mortar in Blissfield. We got a huge amount of money pledged from overseas, and we immediately said, we're not falling for this one, right? I mean, we dropped the whole idea of doing brick and mortar after we got the huge pledge overseas. It immediately made our whole rent for the year. I was like, wait a minute here.
What's going on? Maybe we are Russian disinformation.
yeah. Maybe we're rushing this decision. Let's back off here. So let's go to the beginning of the slideshow here.
You want me to go to the top or start right here?
Let's go to the top. Why not?
Okay. The George Webb Reminds America of Coronathrax Live exercise.
Dave Underdown did a beautiful job in showing how the Brown Brothers and Brown Brothers Harriman were the founders of the Carlyle Group, and the Carlyle Group is the ones that own this. They're the people behind this with the Bin Laden Group and Cofer Black. They're the ones that own the current people that were stockpiling anthrax. The current ones that we just did the huge order yesterday, right, for $235 million. So you might want to block Ted Hanks, but he's probably said something else bad. But
I did block Ted Hanks already.
Okay. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just saying we got to go to the roots here, right? Everybody's saying, these guys that are making these 9 series about me and saying what a bad guy I am. One of the guys says he figured out that it's flu. Flu is going to be the next thing they hit us with. Where was John Cullen? Number one, I normally don't wear sunglasses. I don't wear a hat. I don't have a beard, and I don't hide behind a false name. And I'm not in Thailand. I'm out there in all over the United States, and I go to all these different meetings, 37 different news gathering meetings for 2 weeks at a shot, and everybody gets to know me. Now that could be good. It could be bad. It's probably bad, but I don't see anybody who was on the front end of the influenza. I don't see them at the World Court trying to take the Erasmus lab to the World Court. Okay, if you want to flip through the next slide. I don't see them writing books about the Erasmus lab doing gain of function, right? Remember, I gave this to everyone, including Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, to 18,000 people live when they were thinking that somehow Jordan Walker was doing gain of function, right, in the dance studio. No, Jordan Walker's not doing gain of function in the dance studio. So here we go. Next one. I wrote a book, Royal Dutch Virus, about how Royal Dutch Shell and the Bilderberg Group, along with Prince Bernhard, was the key financier. The cover by Andy Dabala. Right?
Great covers, by the way.
Great cover. We've gone to Navy locations all over the place to talk about the Navy Medical Research Unit and being the key U.S. Armed Forces acting on behalf of the State Department, including Harry Harris and Peter Strzok. And here we are in New London, Connecticut, interviewing 4 Navy corpsmen. We'll keep going. You were here in Navy Health Research Center, Andy, when we were in San Diego. Michael Bennett visited us 3 times. He's a co-patent holder of 3 different small molecule patents with Bob Malone and Sina Bavari.
Driving a Dodge Bronco or Ford Bronco like 2 years before they even came out.
Yeah. Now, what are we hiding? What are we hiding here? We're not hiding anything, are we? Here's the guy who ran the anthrax program. You can see he ran around with a spray bottle. William Patrick III, since the 50s, talking about, hey, we have to be afraid of an anthrax attack, right? They're programming, right? They're priming us with, hey, here comes an anthrax attack. Why? Because they want to shift away from kinetic warfare over to biowarfare.
And just like when we were watching that CTR video earlier, ladies and gentlemen, we brought them Russian scientists and their anthrax scares over here in the early 90s, starting in 92, and a little decade later, next thing you know, there's an anthrax attacks being released in the United States. It's like, what's really going on here? Open your eyes, guys.
So one of the things somebody said is we've never covered H7N9 that's breaking out right now. Andy, you and I both went to the grave site of the Navy aviator in Point Loma, who died, we believe, of H7N9 bird flu on an aircraft carrier going through the Middle East. So when people say I don't cover H7N9, those roses in my hand aren't because I like roses. Let's just leave it at that.
I believe H7N9 was you were talking about Royal Dutch virus. They were definitely working on that in the Erasmus lab as well, and we covered that.
Absolutely, Herbst was doing that. Yep.
Gail Smith, everybody's what's Epstein's favorite traveling partner in Africa?
Andy, you're in the great state of Texas. Texas is Africa is 45 times the size of Texas. Texas is 3 times or 2.8 times bigger than the UK. You can see why the UK, being a small, a blessed plot, Emerald Isle, the pearl, right? You can see why they would want to control all of Africa, right? How are you going to do that if this thing is 100 times bigger than you? Bioagents. It is your force multiplier. That's why Prince Philip went into this. That's just why Jeff Epstein went all over testing all these bioagents all over Africa with Gail Smith, and we got the program right. USAID PREDICT.
Yeah, and he literally admitted it's so easy to do anything you want over here, pretty much. That's why it's like there's no bureaucratic red tape in Africa.
How many times has Aaron been to Africa? 23 times, something like that.
Something like that.
We're not talking about something we don't know about at Neighborhood News. That's where Neighborhood News started in 2010.
Here we got Gail Smith, more Dave Underdown reporting on March 5th, 2021. It was announced that Gail Smith would be the coordinator of the global COVID response and health security at the U.S. Department of State, where she focused on COVID financing, capacity, and global efforts to distribute COVID vaccines. So it's odd that Epstein's traveling partner in Africa has taken over the COVID response, just as Joe Biden is becoming president of the United States.
There you go.
Here we go. In 2001, Smith became a senior fellow at Center for American Progress. The first CAP president and CEO was John Podesta, who has served as White House Chief of Staff to the U.S. President Bill Clinton and as chairman in 2016 of the presidency.
Andy, I just want to say this. I sued John Podesta, and they folded the company the day we served Kim Fritz as CEO and Tony Podesta as well. And the company they had, I also sued, was a company based in Moscow called ARMZ. Now, does that sound like a company that may be dealing in arms from the old Soviet Union to move them and broker them for the DNC onto other people? The company Kim Fritz was a CEO, based in Moscow, was called ARMZ. What was our first clue that the DNC was brokering the old detritus from the old Soviet Union? Right from that lawsuit. And they folded the company. They were the most powerful company on K Street, Podesta and Associates. They were actually on G Street, a couple streets away. But they were the most powerful in Washington. They folded the company because they did not want these transactions being brought to the light of day. Go ahead.
We got from 1998 to 2001, she was special assistant to President Bill Clinton and senior director of African Affairs at the U.S. National Security Council. Podesta hanging out with Clinton.
Africa's 45 times the size of Texas.
Gail Smith is from Bexley, Ohio. After college, Smith worked as a journalist for over 20 years, where she was based in Africa and wrote for publications like BBC News and Financial Times.
And you can't get any closer in Bexley. You can't get any closer to Les Wexner without being a horse handler at Leslie's stable. You can't get any closer in Bexley.
That is true. It is in Bexley. From 2005 to 2007, Gail Smith was the chairman of the Working Group Chair on Global Poverty for the Clinton Global Initiative. The Clinton Global Initiative was founded in 2005 by Bill Clinton. Doug Band, Counselor Bill, was integral to its formation.
And we always said, Andy, that the Blackberries were for the Clinton Global Initiative. Again, nothing with the Gail Smith revelations with Epstein is surprising us at all. Everything's falling into line. Teneo, Jeff Epstein, all the Blackberries, everything's falling into line. Now, you're going to see a picture of Hillary Clinton here in a bathing suit, and we cannot censor that.
Zooming in for all you guys out there who want to see that. Okay. So
the key is the people in the State Department and also the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative, where she was triple-hatted. Huma Abedin was wearing 3 hats. Yeah, also at Teneo, right? She was carrying a BlackBerry, and her husband coined the word crackberry. Not Hunter Biden. Anthony Weiner coined the term crackberry.
All right. So crackberry. All right, I thought it was Hunter, but we'll continue. His attorneys during 2007 plea negotiations on sex offense charges. Financier Jeffrey Epstein also formed part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative, though his name was not mentioned in any of the organization's documents. And then there's Rajiv Shah, grew up in the Detroit area and attended Birmingham Wiley E. Groves High School. Shah was responsible for developing the International Finance Facility for Immunization, which raised more than $5 billion for the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. After Shah resigned from USAID on January 3, 2015, he was appointed Distinguished Fellow and Resident at Georgetown University Edmund A. Wall School of Foreign Service. Who's Shah? I'm not sure who Shah is.
We started doing, in 2016, we started covering Shah, saying there was a virus vaccine game going on in Haiti through this billionaire, and I'm trying to remember his name all of a sudden, but Dave will know it. That's where we first started talking about the virus vaccine game in Haiti with Rajiv Shah through USAID PREDICT. He was the youngest president ever of USAID PREDICT at 37, and then he went on to run the Rockefeller Foundation to really support vaccines. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. The vaccine company was out of North Carolina. Give me a couple of minutes. Yeah.
I'll continue reading. Dave posted in the chat. On April 30th, 2015, President Obama announced his nomination of Gail Smith to be the new administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development to succeed Dr. Rajiv Shah, who resigned the post in February 2015. So Gail Smith.
And so Gail Smith took over for Rajiv Shah?
Yep.
That's basically the Clinton Foundation, left hand to the right. That's Alaman left, to the Clinton Foundation, or grand right and left. It's just one light bulb for another. Yeah.
She gets into USAID as CEO, and then she starts taking over the COVID thing. COVID.
PPD, Eshelman was the billionaire. PPD vaccines, and he was associated with General Grange. So, yeah.
Okay. Established in 2007 with Canadian mining executive Frank Giustra, founder of the petroleum company Pacific Rubiales, renamed Pacific Exploration and Production, Clinton Giustra's Sustainable Growth Initiative describes itself as a pioneering and innovative approach.
And Giustra, the beautiful thing about Giustra was he's Canadian. So I could run all the Clinton Global Initiative transactions through Canada. So I elude at the SEC, and remember SEC, the wife of Peter Strzok was Melissa Hodgman, so there's no SEC laws that are being violated. We just need Eric Braverman to sign on the dotted line, and that's when Braverman goes missing in 2016. So we'll continue.
On October, go ahead.
This is kind of fun.
It is actually pretty fun. I like doing it. It feels good to get back in the saddle. October 18th, 2007 was a United States Navy admiral and diplomat who served as the 11th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and as the ambassador to the United Kingdom and chair of the Intelligence Oversight Board under President Bill Clinton.
I think that's Admiral Morrow there, who I believe.
And it got cut off on the picture, so I'm not 100% sure. So here's Dr. Harsanyi. I wanted you to get into him a little bit. So Dr. Zsolt Harsanyi serves as chairman of the board of Emergent Biosolutions. Dr. Harsanyi has served as chairman of the board of Engene Research Labs, a privately held biotech company, since March 2011. Prior to that, Dr. Harsanyi served as CEO and chairman of the board of directors of Exponential Biotherapies, a private biotechnology company from December 2004 to February 2011.
Now, what's important about Harsanyi is what they did was they took the Bruce Ivins technology and they gave half of it to DynCorp in England, and they gave the other half to Emergent Biosolutions, and they were going to have the two fight it out, right? And what they were going to do, put Bruce Ivins.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
That's how they were going to do it, and they were going to put Harsanyi was going to run DynCorp, and then Fuad El-Hibri was going to run Emergent Biosolutions. Well, what happened was they finally decided, they weren't getting anywhere with the response with the Bruce Ivins recombinant technology because they didn't have the right super antigen to juice the response, the adjuvant to juice the response. So anyway, Harsanyi comes over, and we've been talking about him since 2016. Mm-hmm. He comes over and joins Emergent Biosolutions. So it's just like it's like CIA Team 1 and CIA Team 2 had an intramural trade because one guy hurt his foot.
You're getting called up to the big leagues, buddy. It's like they got a minor league CIA and a major league, which they probably do.
Here we go.
But I wanted to ask you, because your theory on the Epstein Island being more like the blackmail kind of being like a minor operation out of the island. We should be focusing on like the DNA research, the medical research, the financial stuff that they were doing on the island, kind of like the magic in the hat. They want you looking at the blackmail while they're getting those servers out of the back room so they can keep all their research. But like, if you were talking about DynCorp tail numbers and Jeff Epstein before, now that you know that DynCorp vaccine company was involved in a lot of this anthrax stuff and SARS stuff, and you got Jeff Epstein doing DNA research on the island, like just kind of DynCorp and Jeff Epstein. This even just kind of like melds them even more, in my opinion, if that even makes sense.
And Boris, yep. And Boris Nicola, who you see standing next to Bill Gates and Jeff Epstein in the picture, he was the guy who set up the hedge fund in order to take the stuff that they learned from the anthrax technology, the Bruce Ivins technology, and all the tools and sequencers and everything that came out of the anthrax case, because you actually have the anthrax case so that you can sequence all the various versions of the old Russian aims, right? Because Mark Rich doesn't want to pay to sequence it, right? None of the Les Wexner doesn't want to pay to sequence it. Jeff Epstein doesn't want to pay to sequence. There's 200 strains. Let's have an internal lone wolf storytelling time, right? And say it's him. Say it's Bruce Ivins. Now we'll have the FBI pay to do all the sequencing, and that's what happened. So now once we get all the information, now we have to patent all the genes. So if we patent the whole refrigerator full of pathogenic diseases, especially the hemorrhagic fever, we get tremendous amounts of cash for vaccine companies. Now let's take that base of technologies and invest it, right? And the investment club was the British Virgin Islands, because it was outside of the US for Jeff Epstein. We saw that in the last two episodes, right? And now Now, once we've got all the Russian weapons, let's take all the 25,000 things that are in the medicine cabinet, the Funk and Wagnall's medicine cabinet, or, the homeopathic medicine cabinet. Now let's pull stuff out of there. And now let's resequence it and change it slightly, and now make it new and novel, and then patent it, right? And then we'll trash the hydroxychloroquine as fish tank cleaner, and we'll trash ivermectin as a horse, cleaner, a gut
Horse
cleaner.
dewormer.
Yeah, horse dewormer, right? And you could see the pattern they're establishing here. They're going to do this with all 25,000. And we heard Stephen Hatfield say they were going to do this. We heard Bob Malone say they were going to do this. We heard them saying they were going to use Michael Callahan's robots down at Southern Research in Birmingham to do this. This is the plan. They're not going to stop with just two things. They're going to go through all 25,000. And every time they do this, there's going to be a mass formation psychosis so that you pay for it and they don't.
All right. Here we have Dr. Harasani, was founder of Dyneport Vaccine Company, LLC in September 96. Prior to joining Porton Down, Dr. Harasani was Vice President of Corporate Finance at EF Hutton, Inc. Previously, Dr. Harasani directed the first assessment of biotechnology. I think it cut off there.
Yeah.
And then here you're getting to Barbara Cloutier.
The point I wanted to make about Barbara Cloutier, this is an old neighborhood news thing that we did 3 years ago now, but all the people that we're being introduced to in Ukraine war, and Cloutier is one of the 5-star generals in charge of the operations. They bring those forward for a very good reason. They want to hide Barbara Cloutier, who's running the surreptitious program. So it's signal reduction. Again, it's the watch the fast moving hand over here so you don't see the stealth that's going on over here. And she gives quite a presentation here, and we were able to capture it about how she's running all these bioagents and how nothing we've said is speculation. It's all, she gives it in this presentation that we captured 3 years ago.
And I can't play it. So here's
these are just some of the slides, but you can see that they're talking about adept. They're talking about using all the technology and then leveraging it in DARPA, and then coming up with applying it to new drugs and new drug discovery. They want to take over all drug discovery, everything.
That is the plan. You own the discovery, you own the therapy, the recovery, right?
And you know what I love about this, Andy?
I should coin that.
Yeah.
Own the discovery, you own the recovery.
Yeah, I like it. You know what? And you notice everything has got a logo in the right-hand corner up there?
Neighborhood news.
I don't have to read logo, anything. I can retool all this stuff that we did 3 years ago. Boom. It's just as relevant today as it was back then. Yes, this is the reason. And just to get back to you, this is the reason we got into this stuff, was because Ramaswamy yesterday came out and he verified a lot of the work we've been getting into. So we wanted to show you some of the things we were working on in the past. And just let you know, you got to keep following us, because we're on top of things, and the mainstream media, the even the main counter media. I wouldn't say we're the main ones. We're kind of keep pushing us down. You got the Tim Pools and the Tucker Carlsons and all that, and the counter narrative people. I guarantee they're watching our shows too, picking and choosing and the stuff they want to present as well. So we got everyone just kind of digging off George Webb's work here, and George, I'm just happy you're still in the game. If you travel, you could easily do the anthrax puff on you as you're walking down the street one day. So I'm happy you're still walking around. And I want to emphasize, it's not me. It's the whole group, everybody around the world. It's people like you, Andy, and Aaron, and Tyrone, and Dason, and Deborah, and Carol, and Lady Scripps, and people who've lost children, like Lady Scripps in San Diego. That really hurt me when somebody said that I hadn't covered H7N9. That hurt because we had gone there and it was so traumatic, and we'd been there. She'd sponsored our whole time there. It was like 12, 14 days for 18 people. I can't imagine what she spent. She wanted to find out who killed her son. Right. So, I mean, that got me. And that's why I put the H79 N9 up there today. So I sent you some other URLs, Andy. I don't know if you had time to look at those, but I wanted to make sure that we were chock-a-block with content this morning.
Mm-hmm. Which one did you want to pull up?
Well, I sent you so many, I'm forgetting.
You have the Benassi video. You have the Foresight Cops at J6, Joe Biggs, and Donnie O'Sullivan.
Just to show this, again, this has to do with Scott Pelley and 60 Minutes. He's picking on us because we're the leader on three big stories, and they're all a part of the same story, which is this repurposing of the stuff in the Soviet Union to China, right? Mainly. There's other people buying it, Iran and other people buying it too. But that's what's going on. And there were 7 different Middle East companies in this Middle East Marshall Plan but I just want to play for everybody what I told Donnie O'Sullivan in March 2007 so you can hear it for yourself, right? And remember, and there's another video I want to play that showed that Donnie O'Sullivan was taking this out of context because on the third day, we had already pivoted off the Armed Diplomatic Security Services person. We were pivoting toward the people who were taking the bids for DARPA Adept. But here's the conversation between me and Donnie.
You want this one first?
Yeah, we'll play it since you got it up.
And gun it up. Everyone's lost their job, their homes, their businesses that they built up over their whole lives over this. The Benassis are not the only victims. This is not the time to paint one person who is in the middle and mix of all this, who's stonewalling on producing the information. It's not the time to make one person the victim when there's the whole world is being victimized here.
Who do you think is responsible for the virus?
Fort Detrick, and I'm going by people who work there who said they did all this transfection. I'm not saying it didn't occur naturally by walking up the genomic ladder from bats to. So you
think it came from the U.S., not China?
Oh no, there's a collaboration. Dr. Fauci wrote $750,000 checks from the University of North Carolina. It was called the USAID PREDICT program. It was called 1,000 Talents program. Dr. Bavary has 4 startups with Wuhan. He worked at Fort Detrick. I mean, come on. This is a joint development. It's a joint development between the United States and China. There's the purchase orders. I don't know how else you can see it. You can read the report that came out of this, 37 pages of exactly what they did in the test.
George, I appreciate you taking the time.
George Webb.
And then I went on to talk about Virginia Benassi getting the bids in that same interview. So what they did, and plus I gave him the death threats from Ken Hale. Of course, they turned all this story around on me and saying somehow I wanted to wish ill on the Armed Diplomatic Security Services person from the State Department. Here, this is made on the 3rd day, Andy, and we had already pivoted away from the Armed Diplomatic Security Services person. Here we go. I'll play this.
I do want to say, as like an actual journalist, when Donnie O'Sullivan's talking to you right there and you're highlighting some very important information that they should be broadcast, like Donnie O'Sullivan should have taken that information you explained to him about the WIV and the U.S. cooperation, done his own research, went, oh yeah, there is definitely something to this, went on CNN and broadcast that. That there is a connection between the two. But
we know 3.5 years later. 3.5 years later, we got the Senate hearings, we got the Fauci hearings, we got Rand Paul running for president now because of the strength of this testimony. All this got proven to be true. We got Bobby Kennedy writing the book that totally gives us a validation and verification. But I just want to show that we, at the end of this 10 days, Scott Pelley has never apologized. He's never done a retraction. 2 days into it, on the 3rd day, I make this video, which is pivoting away from the Armed Diplomatic Security Services person to go toward higher ups. Here we go.
Virginia Benassi, or a Benassi from Virginia, right over there. Virginia Bernassi or a Bernassi from Virginia. So why am I saying Virginia Bernassi is important now as opposed to Matcha Bernassi? And why am I saying she's connected to the World Health Organization? This is really important because it's NATO's dark hand on the WHO. It's what you don't see, what you are prevented from seeing. NATO puts up these front characters at WHO, but the real dark hand is a organization in WHO called the Secretariat. The Secretariat. They never make the NATO person the president or the CEO, somebody who's out front. It's always the secretary or some vice president, right? So in the case of WHO, you may remember this Dr. Tedros, just the first name Tedros, I won't say the last name, is this Ethiopian warlord, and he was helping Kofor Black and helping the bin Laden family get a pipeline so the bin Ladens could get half of the land that the Sudanese promised the bin Laden family out to Djibouti. And be that as it may, he's a warlord that made it happen, that monitored the right-of-way, monitored the pipeline. He only represents 6%, this Dr. Tedros. This is the same person who's saying how virulent the coronavirus is right now to Trump. So this is an important character, and other channels, Amazing Polly did a piece on him, and that's an important minor piece. But the real story is who controls the World Health Organization. And the technical officer in the World Health Organization is Virginia Bernassi. Not only that, she is writing all the proposals to respond to virus outbreaks. She did the response in Africa, again, Peter-struck countries in Kenya, Tanzania, etc. Remember, Dr. Plummer dies in Kenya, the virologist from the biolab in Winnipeg in February of 2020. So the Secretariat is NATO's hand. NATO's hand is the controlling hand, and the puppet is Dr. Tedros. So Tedros is kind of important to know that he's a puppet. That's important work that Amazing Polly did, but it's more important to know whose hand is in the puppet, and that is the NATO Secretariat. And Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia Bernassi is that person. And there may be a fourth reason Scott Pelley decided. Remember, this is 2 days before January 6th for this attack. He doesn't attack Alex Jones. He doesn't attack Tucker Carlson. He doesn't attack Tim Pool. He doesn't attack Whitney Webb. He doesn't attack James O'Keefe or Project Veritas. He attacks us and our group. And there's a reason for it, because we also had a line on January 6th. We also went to 4 Psych Ops. We identified Emily Rainey loading the buses up, right next to Peter Strzok Sr.'s house in Pinehurst, right? He's loading the buses up. Why are you loading the buses? Because you want to dog walk people who think they're going for the right reason. You want to dog walk them into the Capitol, and you want to create the impression of an insurrection. You want to get away from Trump Russia. You want to get away from the lockdown. You want to get away from the forced vaccination. You want to get away from the Hunter Biden encrypted communications devices, and you want to get over to, hey, these people are dangerous white supremacists doing an insurrection.
Well,
I was going to play the video where I'm actually at Fort Bragg, at Fort Psych Ops headquarters, and I'm saying that the one at Fort Bragg, and just so it's on the record, I'm standing there before. Well, you can play that too if you want.
Sorry, I got the Fort Bragg one. I got a lot of videos this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with me.
Don't worry. Yeah, on that.
Webb.
Go ahead.
Well, on that January 6th video, I'm saying we called it. We called it for Psych Ops, and I'm running down the thing trying to get to the other side because somebody told me Joe Biggs was going to, or somebody says there's going to be action at the other gate. So I'm running around the other, and as I'm running, we called it for Psych Ops. So.
And there's a picture of the pixelated BlackBerry in the top right corner, by the way.
Yep.
And I am live from Fayetteville, North Carolina. We've taken you to Fayetteville many times in the past. This is the headquarters of Special Forces, Special Operations, Special Forces and Special Operations. You can see the museum here behind me for the Special Forces Museum. You can see the flags and so forth. That gentleman over there, the patron saint of Special Forces, which is General Shelton. We're going to tie this in how this relates directly to election operations, because special forces doesn't just do the special operations like getting Osama bin Laden, where you see all these helicopters going in, these guys shimmying down all the ropes, they're bursting in through doors, and then all the shooting and so forth. Special operations can also be nonviolent special operations. And the key nonviolent special operations force that was created by the assistant of General Shelton, one David Petraeus, was called Canvas. Canvas. The N and the V in the word canvas stands for nonviolent. So Canvas was the special operations group in Eastern Europe created through General Shelton's planning originally for the operations in Kosovo. So we'll break all this down for you, but just to let you know here.
Go ahead.
The beautiful part is the bus comes in the middle of that video. The bus comes right through there.
Emily Rainey gets off herself.
I almost catch her live coming off the bus. You know, you just can't plan stuff like this.
That'd have been great if they were wearing like Trump hats and like all their backpacks and stuff. You're like, wait a second, what's going on here?
Hey, the encrypted radio's working. Test, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. So anyway, not to put too fine a point on it, Andy, we're coming up to the end of the show. We got John O'Loughlin coming up. We're probably going to move this show to noon. We had it early in the morning for our researchers in Europe. But there are people on the West Coast who think that this is a little too early. 6 a.m. is a little too early to start doing news. So we're going to pivot, if without any objection in the chat. We get so many great researchers out on the West Coast, Thermobstacle, all the Lady Scripps, all these great researchers, Chris, the IP Hunter. And we want them to have a chance as well to contribute. And we hope that's not too late. Greenwich Mean Time +5 at noon is still 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not too late.
There's just a lot of complaints about watching my hair dry in the morning too. George Webb, we got to get rid of it. You got to let it fully dry before the show starts.
It is drying as we speak. It is drying.
You get what you get, people. I do have one bit of information before we go. I did a little research myself. I know we were digging into Epstein Island and Southern Trust and why these billionaires were going to the island, doing some gene sequencing and DNA research. And I found a little something that kind of proves that we're on the right track. Sergey Brin, he actually found out that his genes are susceptible to Parkinson's. He has this like LKK4 gene that, and he's actually working with Michael J. Fox. He's donated $1 billion to fight Parkinson's. He's donated money to Africa for this Parkinson's gene. And I think you're right on track. And I think he went to Epstein Island, got his gene sequence, found out he's susceptible to Parkinson's, and now he's fighting it, George Webb. And that's all because of his visit to Epstein Island.
Well, he is one of the 4 billionaires we talked about in our 4 Billionaires show. That's our previous show. I've met Sergey Brin. He was at a program. I also met the guy who came up with HTTP from the CERN group, which was another group formed, a nuclear research group that was formed after World War II. And all of a sudden, he's been knighted as well. And all of a sudden, I'm forgetting his name. But he invented HTTP. And, Sergey, I like Sergey. He was very approachable, and I had a nice conversation with him. And as a billionaire, this guy's a billionaire. He's sitting there talking to you. The reason why is these guys really aren't they're really still beholden. Even though Jeff Bezos is a billionaire and all these people are billionaires, they're still beholden. They're still answering to the man. If they decided one day not to play the role that they're playing, hey, Mossad's coming in, and the fentanyl drops are going in the ear. You're going to have a heart attack the next day if you don't play ball in these games. You don't get to choose. If you want to be the guy who becomes the front man for Google and for Googling your genome, you don't get a choice. Larry Page at Michigan with PageRank, you don't get a choice. If you're going to be repurposing a lot of the DARPA technology and you're going to be that guy who gets to live off the billion, you don't get to walk away from it anytime you want. So it's kind of like a deadly embrace with these guys. And that's why they're so approachable. It's not really their money. At any point, it's like Epstein. It's not really his money. At any point he wants to just go away, then he's really going to go away because he's a liability. Then he immediately becomes a liability.
It's like the deep state trust that everyone has access to.
Yeah, your life becomes this. So I look at the various things that came out of this. The adjuvants, for instance, Nancy Hagewood, Chiron, squalene. They use squalene again with Bruce Ivins, a Bruce Ivins connection. Does she have a reason now to implicate Bruce Ivins? Of course she does. She's a Kappa Kappa Gamma for Rockefeller as well. So all these people all along the way, Mark Kulak talks about the fentanyl overdoses. Fentanyl is derived because people were heroin addicts were getting anthrax, right? Because of the way anthrax heroin paste is processed. They were the wool, people working with wool and so forth were getting anthrax, so this is, anthrax has been around a long time as far as the British East India Company is concerned, right? With their people who are their addicts also getting anthrax. So it makes perfect sense that they would have all the patents in this. They would have all the intellectual property. And anthrax, not to put too fine a point on it, but is being used as a gene therapy delivery mechanism. And the bottom line that I didn't know when we were looking at Popov and all those Russians in 2017 at Sandy Hook with the kids, the thing I didn't know is that anthrax causes meningitis. If only I would have known that, I would have been able to go. I'd have been able to pop off on Popov, right, in real time in November 2001. I would have been able to say, wait a minute, you're the guy who used anthrax as a gene therapy. And I know this isn't speculation. He took the myelin gene and put it into a vector, right? And tried to create a remyelinating solution. This is to repair damaged notochords or damaged spinal columns, sort of repair the Christopher Reeve, type of thing. When somebody's crippled, you want to repair their spinal column by remyelinating their spinal cord. And what he did was he created, not only did he not repair, but his myelin solution caused the body to attack the natural spinal column, causing these meningitis, right? And so that's where he had a smoking gun. And the fact he comes out right after, while Bruce Ivins names Farkhouse as the guy doing the GE healthcare, the fact he names Farkhouse, and then boom, Popov's come out and he's introduced on Nova as the hero. So I just find that very odd timing. So what do you think, Andy?
Popov giving new names to the Moscow Mule. But I do have one more, just a little bit.
Let's do questions. I don't think John has a show, so let's do questions.
Just one little, real quick. So Google, they have their own life sciences division. It's called Verily. The person who runs it is by the name of this Andrew Conrad. He was a geneticist out of California, and he actually started the North Carolina Research Campus himself. And they have this thing called the baseline study. This is their main project they were working on. I think Epstein may have had some help in this if they're involved in the DNA research. So Project Baseline is a broad effort to map human health led by Verilize Life Sciences, formerly of Google. Health Sciences Division and was announced on Wall Street. It begins with the Project Baseline Study, which will collect phenotypic health data from approximately 10,000 participants over the course of at least 4 years. The project employs experts from different fields, and pretty much they're just trying to like map the genome and monitor it over an extended period of time. And that's something that I think that Epstein and maybe Sergey Brin in this Google Southern Trust maybe relationship was working on. But you want to get into the chat real quick, George Webb?
I do, but I want to show people, if they somehow get disconnected from our URLs and so forth, how they can go and find where our videos will be. Okay, so let's show them the Rumble channel and actually spell out the Rumble channel. And let's also do the chat as well.
Okay, so here, let me pull it up. So on Rumble, we are just to let everyone know, we are on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we are also, you can, if you're traveling, you can, and you can't watch a video, which I say you do because we do a lot of graphics, but if you're traveling, you just want to listen, we're on Apple, Spotify, we're on Google Play, we're on Amazon, or on Alexa, iHeartRadio, or on all the audio apps as well. So you can definitely give us a listen. But if you go to, let me see if I can, I believe all you have to do is put neighborhood news in the top search bar, and you can just go to Neighborhood News Network, and you can find all of our channels on Rumble. So we are Neighborhood News Network on Rumble and YouTube. I changed everything to network so we could kind of be copacetic with YouTube because we've been banned so many times we had to change our name. So I changed it all to Neighborhood News Network. So Neighborhood News Network on Rumble. I don't know yet. You can see this. We are Neighborhood News Network on YouTube as well. Got all of our channels, videos. I believe you have to go into the live tab. I'm trying to fix this. It just goes under home. I don't know why.
Yeah, the live tab. Make sure people know about the live tab, because they'll go there on the home tab and then they'll go, oh, there's no videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I tried to switch it so it goes under home yesterday, and it like literally will not do it. So you gotta go to our page and hit that live tab, because all of our shows are live. They aren't edited. They're that's why I say real news, real people, in real time, because we are always live. You get to see some mistakes. You get to see some of the magic happen as well, though. And what else are we on? Facebook. Facebook, I guess we're still Neighborhood News Studio. Find the videos all there. Facebook is actually the best one to go to, in my opinion, if you want to go to our watch our archive, because they did not take down anything on Facebook. All of our videos going back to January 6th are all on Facebook for the past couple of years, and you can catch all of that research there. But George, what else did you want to do?
Well, let's do comments now. I just wanted everybody to know, I'm also probably going to do a weekly summary so people can catch up. That will summarize the previous 3 shows, and I'll probably do that show on like Sunday, an hour show that summarizes the highlights of the 3 shows. But I might not do that until a couple of weeks from now, so don't get behind. Start watching all the shows. If this is your first show that you're watching, go back and see the first 2. Because we keep building. We're on a research path. We're on the war path here. And so we're hammering away. And the way you can catch up is watch the previous episodes. We've tried to do a lot of explaining in these first 3 shows so that you can go, oh, I don't have to watch older shows than this. I'll just take these 3 and then we'll move forward from here.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I thanks for like stating that. That's something I want to point out, because I have people that like tune in and stuff, like family members, and and they can't like figure out where we're at exactly. Sometimes we touch on some mainstream topics here, but we touch on them in a way where they relate to the research that we're doing. We're not like Fox News. We're not like CNN. We're not taking. We don't get the email in the morning from the Clintons, from the Bidens, from the deep state players. We don't get that email in the morning telling us what to say. We do all our own research ourselves, and we try to show the public what we're doing exactly and what's going on with the world that the mainstream media, that the mainstream news is not telling you. So make sure it does take a second to catch up, but keep tuning in, because once you catch up and once you're with the storyline, you'll see what's really going on in the world, and you'll be ahead of the game, and you'll be happy you followed us.
Okay, well then with that, we'll do comments real quick. How's that?
All right. So these may be a little out of
Have you
order.
heard from Aaron lately?
I've seen yeah, I talk to him every day, the day before the show. I'll be there. I'll be there. I'll be there. And then I send him the link, and no Aaron pops in. So everyone put some pressure on Aaron here.
Okay. I'm just worried about him because he's the one who wanted me to come back and do the show, and I'm like, are you ever going to watch it? So
I know. I'm
he's
pretty sure that's what Aaron gave me the call. Aaron gave you the call. Said call George. We set it up. Started doing the show. No Aaron.
But he has 4 kids, a wife. Also, he has 2. Remember where I used to live in the basement? He now not only has the African queen here. She's the one who kicked me out when I left the basement in Michigan. But they also have another African prince, the brother-in-law, I think. So he's got 7 people in that house now, and so I would have never. I'm much more comfortable now. Let me just tell you,
Aaron, your house isn't big enough to fit all of Africa. It's a lot of people.
To do a deck. We need to do a deck at Aaron's house just so people can get out and get outside for a second, to change their mind. It's that they're so crowded, but those kids are so beautiful and smart.
I did eat some Ghanaian food the other day, and I'm not kidding. Like 3 seconds later, I'm just like pouring sweat. It's just like, what do they put in this stuff?
But she does such a good job. Aaron's wife does such a good job with those kids, and we want. Aaron has all these show ideas, Andy, and he's got all the shows that we had done before. Make your kid a doctor, make your kid a nurse, make your kid an engineer. Now we've got Karmadoc, right? Now we've got, who's a PhD in engineering. Now all the people we've got in automotive. My God, we've got like 10. And they all work for Ford or GM or, they're over there. Not only that, we got some people that were at the TACOM, the Tank Command in northern Detroit, and, that's where they test all the tanks, for RoboCop, so it's the TACOM, This is where Steve Ballmer stole BASIC to go over and make Microsoft a successful entity. Microsoft had nothing. Microsoft had QDOS. That was an operating system they stole out of Arizona. Literally, Bill Gates and his father were sitting in Redmond like this, twiddling their thumbs, because we have nothing. Nothing. We have an operating system and nothing. I mean, there's a music synthesizer you could play that would go bleep, 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 4-bit music synthesizer. Bleep, 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 bleep. They had nothing. Nothing. They had nothing. Unless Steve Ballmer steals BASIC out of the Tank Command, out of TACOM, they have bupkis. There would be no Microsoft. There would be no vaccines. There would be no Bill Gates. Ballmer steals BASIC out of the TACOM. We have people we work with that are at the TACOM saying, yeah, I stole the BASIC. That's how Microsoft gets to be the biggest company in the world, right? So
there's a lot more theft when it comes to that stuff than you ever would imagine.
They're all DARPA kids. Yeah.
There is one little story. I don't know if you'd like to comment on it or not, but
Sure.
I'm sure you've seen the Chabad Lubavitch tunnels going on in New York. But I guess this Till Wooler, I guess this Rabbi Samuel Kametsky is connected to Igor Kolomoisky out in Ukraine, and you've done a lot of work on Igor Kolomoisky. Is there anything to, I know like the tunnels are just being sealed, you don't need to like comment on that. Is there anything to this connection though between these people and Igor Kolomoisky that we should know more about, or just
Andy,
nothing burger story?
I want you to put on a calculator. If you have a little calculator close by, I want you to put on a calculator how many times Aaron Adler told us the story of the sixth Rebbe of the Chabad Lubavitch being kidnapped and being brought to New York after World War II by the OSS, and so that they could run Mossad operations out of New York City, right, out of Brooklyn. Right?
He brought it up like 6 times a show.
6 times a show. So how many times, there was a Q drop on the Fiddler. Remember, there was a Q drop on the Fiddler, and we said, no, that's not the Fiddler. You think, because everybody's saying it's the Fiddler's this, the Fiddler's that. And remember John O'Loughlin, the first time he ever meets me, he's the Fiddler.
That is true.
Standing on the steps of the Capitol, he's the Fiddler, right? The Fiddler is literally the guy who played Fiddler on the Roof. And John is, Mr. Intelligence, right? Mr. FBI, let's kick the CIA's ass, a guy. He's referring to the Fiddler, which was this Osman, who actually played Fiddler on the Roof in this little town called Anatevka in Ukraine. And that guy, Osman, Azman, was the broker for all the bios from the old Soviet Union. And he's got them all in Ukraine. And so you have to go to Anatevka. You have to go see the Fiddler if you want to buy the bios. The Fiddler is the key. But the reason why they threw it in the Q drops was to get away from the Fiddler. Let's not talk about Osman anymore. Let's not talk about his bagmen anymore. But if you remember, with Christy I.P. Hunter and some people in California, we identified that it was Fruman and Parnas that were the runners in the United States for the Ukrainian criminal organization with Chabad Lubavitch, for Kolomoisky, right? And we said it was Lev Parnas. We said it was Fruman. We gave you all their IP addresses. Right, so we've outed the whole operation, and so when I see a story like this, it's another hat tip in a way to neighborhood news, because we know that this is the poison meat, right? We know this is the poison meat that we're not going to go for. We're going to go to the Fiddler in Anatevka, because that's how Rudy Giuliani, if you remember, he got talked into going to see Osman and smoking the cigar and meeting Kolomoisky, because these were runners for DNC kickback artists. These are the guys who take the hundreds of billions and then they send back a few billion to their candidates in the DNC.
All right, George Webb, giving you the real scoop on the Chabad Lubavitch. Don't be looking at the tunnels. It's all about the connections between the rabbis and the government officials. So George Webb, we are at the end of the show today. We'll be back Monday at what time?
Let's come back at noon. Let's come back at noon East Coast time. I will have something hopefully by Sunday that'll just be a quick hit on some of the things we covered. So hopefully people will go back and watch all 6 hours, because they're the most important 6 hours. Remember, Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes, CNN, Jeff Zucker, and Daniel Sullivan. They don't go after Alex Jones. They don't go after Tucker. They don't go after James O'Keefe. They come after us. That shows you, that's the metadata you need to know that this is the juice. So I'll see you at noon on right here, same station, Andy, on Monday.
Ladies and gentlemen, noon on Monday. Make sure, I would help you out with the show on Sunday, George, but I am going to the Cleveland Browns playoff game in Houston tomorrow night, and I will be traveling back in a snowstorm in Texas, so I'll probably be stuck on the freeway for like a couple days.
Well, let's talk about that. Wait a minute. Let's talk about them Browns. You know, I'm from Cleveland too. I'm from
Hey, we're
Cleveland
making
too.
a run. We're making a run.
And I don't want you working weekends. I want you taking the weekend off. I might do a little summary on my Twitter to send people here to say, hey, watch this. This is what you're going to see. It's not going to be a summary like don't watch the 6 hours. It's going to be, hey, here's the juice. You should watch this 6 hours. So anyway, that'll be something that you can send to your friends out there in TV land. You can send it to your friends and go, hey, you should watch this. This is Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes, CNN, Jeff Zucker. They tried to take these guys out 2 days before January 6th. Watch and see what they got to say. So, Andy, when is that game on Sunday?
It's actually Saturday at 3:30, so it'll be it should be a fun one. My brother, my cousins are all going down to Houston and watching Joe Flacco hopefully whoop some Texans butt. But everyone's a little confident. As a Browns fan, I get a little anxiety when everyone's like, "We're gonna win." It's like, haven't you watched the Browns in the past 20 years?
Now, is that it? Is that at NRG Stadium? Is that the same one that when Michigan played at NRG?
Yes, sir. It'll be downtown Houston, NRG Stadium. Be taking my heart meds so I don't have a heart attack and having a good time. You know, just make it a nice, clean win. That's all I ask you, Cleveland.
Joe Flacco. Speaking of heart, Joe Flacco's going to make that last pass, and the Browns are going to win. You know, the Super Bowl, right? And then boom, that's it. He's given everything done. You know, so. But let's hope Joe hangs in there and has a great playoff. And I'll see you on Monday. And we'll be talking about the Browns game.
And just to let everyone know, we did show those little videos on Rumble that George did. If you want to catch up on some of those, George Webb, all one word, on Rumble, you can go and find those videos there. Little 2-minute, 7-minute updates. George, it's like a longer version of his Twitter videos. Give him a follow at Real George Webb 1 on Twitter. Donate some money on PayPal at GeoWebb, GeoWebb, or just go to his Twitter profile and hit that buy me a coffee link and buy him like 30 coffees. You know, George said he wakes up at 2 a.m. and writes some Substack articles, so he needs a bunch of coffee to keep it going. And then we will see you Monday at noon Eastern. You're welcome to the West Coast people. Make sure now that we move the time slot, that you're commenting in the chat, that you're liking and subscribing. We're all ears. We'll listen to some tips and we'll improvise a little bit. So like and subscribe. George Webb, you have a great weekend. We'll look forward to those updates, and I'll see you Monday. Go Browns.
Go Browns. Thanks, Andy. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Started seeing like blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries. They were blackberries. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment.